Thank you so much, Elana, Avi, Mike, Sherry, Liz, to all of you. You know how we usually start with good evening. But all of those, usual terms we use, how are you? Good evening. Now I think twice before I utter those words. Good evening. But it is a good evening. It's a good evening because you're here. It's a good evening because all of us answer the call of Hinenu. Here we are. We rise to the occasion. So it's a good evening. No matter what the pain, the sorrow that we go through, the terrible grief, it's a good evening. It's being together on this good evening for the best of causes, a Jewish cause, an Israeli cause, but most of all, a human cause, a cause of humanity. So let's take a moment and appreciate all of us here. A good evening. A round of applause to us. I also want to start by acknowledging a great friend of mine whom I didn't expect to see here tonight, but I actually lucked out in seeing. One of the great heroes of Israel and my personal hero, Yotam Pulitzer, who is the CEO of Israel, who's done so much around the world, who is here tonight. Yotam, it's such a pleasure. Israel and Yotam have always been a source of pride for our state, for our people, and again, for humanity, for all of the good deeds out there that are so horribly and tragically so much needed in Israel today. Od lo avda tikvatenu. Hope. Hope. Hope is the most important concept we should hold on to in spite of the cruelty and the difficulties that we're facing. Hope, in spite of the cruel imageries that came out of October 7th. For as Mike so aptly said, Israel will never be the same Israel, and the world will not return to be the same, for October 6th shall be no more. And October 7th was a bloody dawn that heralded a new world on so many levels. The arguments that we present have faces. They have names. I'm thinking of babies. I'm thinking of children. I'm thinking of the Bardichevsky twins who spent 14 hours in a closet after the parents were murdered by the monsters, not militants, not even terrorists. These are monsters from the dark. For 14 hours, they were crying until they were rescued, a miracle unto its own. A face like that of Avigail, 3-year-old, whose parents, Ro'i and Smadar, were murdered in front of her face, and who was snatched by those monsters into the dark of the city of evil in Gaza, taken away from them. And her 2 siblings, Michael and Amalia, 6 and 9, hid in a cabinet for many hours, were not willing to come out, not even when the Israel Defense Forces arrived after too many hours. They were only willing to come out when their uncle Amit told them, "It's Amit, you can come out." All the while, young 9-year-old Michael communicated with Magen David Adom Center on the phone. "Hi, it's Michael calling. I'm alone with my sister in the closet. I don't hear anything from outside aside from weird people and a different language. What about your parents? I don't think they're alive. Stay with me on the line. Just keep quiet. I will let you know. I will let you know. But I have to hang up now," she said, "because there are other people calling. But I'll check in on you. I'll check in on you." Stories like the return to the forefront of Shema Israel. Shema Israel, which was the rescue cry of so many of the survivors who were able to fight off the monsters, but to be able to be identified as Jews immediately upon seeing the Israel Defense Forces coming into those towns and villages which went through the Holocaust, the massacre, the slaughter, the butchery, said, "Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, I am Jewish, I am Jewish." These horrible atrocities have names, have faces. We don't carry just arguments. We carry each and every one of those faces as we engage, as we communicate. I can tell you on my personal level, throughout my life, all of those victims of the suicide bombings, the terrorist attacks, all of them have faces. All of them have a life story. He who saves a life saves the world entire. and he who loses a life loses a world entire. What were their dreams, their hopes? Who were they? What contribution would they have given to the world had they been allowed to stay with us if it weren't for that horrible evil that engulfed us all? Israel of October 7th is another Israel, but I dare say the world as well. When I go out and speak up for Israel, just like you, what is the message that we try to carry out there? What is the story that we try to tell? They always try to drag us back into the equations of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I just want to stress once, twice, thrice, and endlessly that Israel of October 6th and the discussions of October 6th are not those of October 7th. For on October 7th, a great evil was unleashed unto Israel. A great evil that comes from fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism, Hamas, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement. The Islamic resistance movement that came to commit genocide against innocent Jews, children, families, parents. You know, when you think about the concept of children, you think about what do we want for our kids? What would make us proud? We know what would make us proud when an IDF soldier calls back home and says, Abba, I saved a life. But we also know the monstrosity that was created only a few miles from our border when one of those monsters calls his family in one of those files that was published by the IDF. Dad, you'll be so proud of me. I killed 10 Jews with my own hands. Put on your video, I want to show you. The phone I'm using belonged to a Jewish woman I killed, and I murdered her husband. Tears of joy on the other side. The father is so proud. Wow, you are our hero. Will you come back? No, I want to kill more until we win, until we conquer. This is the monstrosity we face. And then comes the big moral dilemma. How much am I allowed to share? So for we have been privy to some of the most horrendous imagery one can imagine. A level of barbarism through the GoPro carried by those monsters. We have seen sights I can never unsee. Sights that reside deep within my soul, that eat away at me every day. Sights that I'm asked by Israel to share with opinion leaders, to show them what we've been through, what we're facing. Can I share those with you? I can't. It's difficult. It's difficult. You read about those stories, but when you see them, when you see the pregnant woman, when you hear Eli Beer from United Hatzalah speak about the baked baby, and then check it out on Instagram where somebody quoted that and said, did you at least use a baking powder? That is the kind of evil that we're facing, not just there in the city of evil, but right here in our streets, with people who come out in support of Palestinians? No, no. I support Palestinians. With the blood of my soldiers, we are releasing Palestinians in Gaza from Hamas's rule. For Hamas has immiserated not just Palestinians in Gaza, but the region as a whole, as an Iranian proxy. We are liberating Palestinians. Anybody who cares about Palestinians should support Israel, for we are ridding the region of great evil. It wasn't, don't believe the Jew. Believe the son of Hamas, Mus'ab Youssef, who speaks about those issues and said Hamas is not a national movement, it's an Islamic movement. It just uses the Palestinian cause as an excuse for their Islamist ideologies guided by the Islamic Republic of Iran. We know the enemy we face. So not pro-Palestinian, just like it's not militants or even terrorists. These are pro-Hamas, pro-terror groups. Call them for what they are. Call evil by its name. A line has been drawn in the sand. For October 6th is not October 7th. The moral question before us is clear. Do you side with humanity or do you side with barbarism? Oh, it's complicated. No, it's not. It's not complicated. It's very simple. Do you side with decapitation of babies? Do you side with cutting out limbs and dehumanize the very corpses while piles of those limbs were put on fire, torched, so that they're unrecognizable? with pieces of human flesh which now remain to be identified in Israel's forensic centers, which are unable to do so. So we have to resort to Israel's Antiquities Authority and use technology that we use for the ruins of Pompeii and archaeology of 2,000 years ago to be able to bring some of those families' loved ones to burial, to a final rest. This is the enemy that we face. But it's nothing new. We've known Hamas for years. We grew up on Hamas. Once, when I was young, it happened once. I remember when in 1994, shortly after the signing of the Declaration of Principles and the Oslo Accords, it was Hamas that introduced Israel to the concept of suicide bombings. And lo and behold, only a few years later, they presented themselves on global stages. The same suicide bombing. And then that bus, line number 5 on Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv, exploded. And an image was sprawled on the cover of Yediot Achronot, the main paper, of Ovadia, the driver, sprawled all over the steering wheel. And the media, Israeli media, had to ask itself, should we? Could we? For you know we're Israelis, we don't victimize ourselves. But how do we cope with the atrocities? It was Hamas that would put in those iron bullets, those nails, to increase impact and injury. That is the nature of the monstrosity that we faced, the death cult that has excelled to such a degree until it was able to manufacture the great massacre of Jews, the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, all filmed on GoPro cameras for the world to see their might, their heroism. Ghazi Hamad, one of their spokespersons, who said yesterday, we would do it tenfold. And you ask yourself, where do you stand? And I dare ask you today to ask everyone else, where do you stand? A line has been drawn in the sand. Yesterday is not today. We demand that you make a stand. No more the wishy-washy language of, give me a minute. It's complex. No, it's not. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said that you have to look at the situation. It didn't happen in a vacuum. As if there is any context or any excuse to torture 2 parents in front of their children, to tie them together, torment the children in front of the parents, amputate the leg, take out the fingers of the young boy, before you do the same to the parents, and then torch them alive while you grab a Coke from the fridge. This is what we have been able to unsee, have not been able to unsee. Those images that will accompany us for the rest of our lives. But it's nothing new. It's always been there. But I assume that we shall forever carry the guilt of not acting sooner, of not realizing the nature of evil, of assuming that maybe other people are like us, maybe they have our values, maybe if we only let them be, then their hateful ideology will be kept in name only and not in deed. We were wrong. If there is one lesson we shall forever take with us from these atrocities, and that's lesson not just for Israel, but for the world and for each and every one of us, if they tell you who they are, believe them. And they told us who they were. The summer camps with those Gazan kids carrying a gun, with the math books that tell you if you kill a Jew and another 10, how many did you kill? With gym classes that show you how to draw a knife so that you can slit the throat of a Jew effectively and efficiently so that they die. They told us who they were. We didn't listen. We complain about college campuses. We see the great moral, not just haze, but cowardice that exists out there, touching the core of what's supposed to be the spearhead, the front line of American higher education, the Ivy League, where every campus, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, Harvard, everywhere, the same comments: lack of action by leadership, harassment of Jewish students, not carrying any symbol of Israel. Jewish students at Cooper Union in New York, Jews' crime was only wearing a kippah, while the knocking on the doors, that was the knocking of history. It was history knocking on the door. It was the Holocaust knocking on the door. It was the Kishinev pogroms knocking on the door. Free Palestine, they said, but they meant kill the Jews. And those Jews received an advice from the librarian, come, I will take you. You can hide in the attic. You can hide in the attic. October 2023, New York City, the United States of America. This is, my friends, a wake-up call. This is a clear-cut equation. We've always dabbled in the discussion of anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, different, the same. Here it is, staring at you in the eye. What is Israel if not the Jew among the nations? What is October 7th if not a clear-cut genocide? Clear-cut genocide, cruel genocide. I woke up this morning to a video of a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor with Parkinson's who recorded the message as she's trembling. You can find it on my Twitter feed. Why am I alive when my young granddaughter was butchered so cruelly? Why am I alive with the images that keep on playing in my mind of the abuse she suffered before she was killed, murdered, taken? Why am I alive? This is the face of modern anti-Semitism. For anti-Zionism is nothing more and nothing less than a regeneration of that ill virus, that horrible disease that gnaws away at the foundations of our society. And make no mistake, that moral decay that is anti-Semitism is a social decay of the greatest kind. It's a social decay that touches us all. It doesn't just touch Israel, nor does it touch the Jews. The battle that the soldiers, the brave young men and women of the IDF are waging now against the ultimate evil is a battle for humanity. It's a battle against barbarism. And the battle that we wage here against those who support barbarism is our battle for our children. It's our battle for the children butchered, slaughtered, tortured, maimed and massacred in the towns and villages of I can't even say around Gaza, that word. It's the battle to save our children who were snatched into the dark, who were taken. It's for Eitan Yahalomi, 12-year-old, who saw his father killed before his eyes, who was immediately thrown on a motorcycle, taken to the dark side, along with his mother and 2 sisters. The motorcycle they were on broke. They ran barefoot for 3 hours until they went back to civilization. Yes, I use that word, civilization. Eitan, he didn't make it. He disappeared into the dark. And for almost a month, knowing that his father was murdered before his very eyes, he's there under Hamas's dungeons. And we keep on hearing the word humanitarian. But for some reason, that value of humanity does not apply to our children, to our elderly. To the Holocaust survivor who was dragged from the safe room, her phone was used to Facebook Live her execution while she was shot in the head. That is not what humanitarian or humanity should apply to. Our pain means nothing. The evil perpetrated against us, the bloodied hands that were raised against Israel in Congress yesterday, the complete ignorance on all levels from the pain of Israel and the Jewish people. For I am yet to hear a denunciation when Rashida Tlaib is being given the microphone. Do you denounce, get this, it's a tough question, especially if you're on Ivy League. Do you denounce the decapitation of babies? And then the engines of hatred are in full motion. What we used to learn about Holocaust denial is right before us. It didn't take them 75 years. It didn't even take them 2 weeks. And it wasn't even us. It's their GoPro cameras. And yet I'm faced with questions. This is AI generated. You, Israel, are so technologically savvy and sophisticated. You manufactured that evidence. You, Israel, you Jews. You, Israel, you Jews. I don't know if you've heard, but in another institution, Yale University, when a student wanted to present the atrocities that took place and she indicated those atrocities, the editors told her it's unsubstantiated. So it was removed from the op-ed. It's unsubstantiated, only on the cameras of GoPro. I told them I would have come and told them myself I saw those images. But it's unsubstantiated. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Make no mistake. And even now, as we wage this battle, and we are encountered by forces who tell us, promote peace, fight for peace, we are fighting for peace. For this is a war against peace. There is a reason why it happened when it happened. Iran and its proxies do not want to see peace in the region. They want to see piece by piece taking out the region, bless you. They want to take out the masses who desire a different life in the name of their ideology. And there is the challenge to all of us. Are we willing to take a stand against the Islamic Republic? Do we believe them when they call us the small Satan and they call the US the big Satan? Do we take them at their word? Do we learn the lesson in which the state of Israel failed so miserably? For this is an age of accountability. It's different to use even the word silver lining to what happened. Those images will haunt us for many years to come. I can tell you that when I speak for myself, but I believe many of my compatriots, will leave with guilt and blame and shame for many years for what happened. For we are part of that generation that allowed this to happen. We are. And this will be our burden to bear for as long as we are alive. But at the same time, we know that October 6th is not October 7th. This needs to be an age of accountability. For the first time, we have to see consequences to those evil deeds. No more can we sit quietly, idly by and just say, they don't really mean it. No more can we afford to complain over Shabbat dinner and say, did you hear about what happened at Princeton? That's horrible. For if we do so, we are complicit with evil. We are undermining the very future of our children. We are exposing them to that danger. Those people who march on the streets in support of not the Palestinians, terror, Hamas, massacre, genocide, evil, they need to be called out. They need to be punished. We live in an age of accountability, where the disgusting NYU law student who published in their newsletter, "We support Palestinian resistance," immediately lost a job offer, immediately was deposed. We rose to the occasion. We demanded accountability. And guess what? Accountability happened. Resistance. 2 days after the butchering of innocents. 2 days while the Zaka people were still collecting pieces of corpses, scraping them off the walls with tsunamis of blood. And they take a shower with our blood and demand more and more Jewish blood. No more can we afford to keep quiet when presidents of universities, no matter where they are, tell us that it's too complicated. It's too complex. There are too many tragedies in the world. We can't make a statement about each and every one. So people like Mark Rowan, who's leading the movement of Jewish funders and donors, who call upon those universities and say, not our money, not our money. This is an age of accountability, consequences. We see those marching on the streets on behalf of decapitation, murder. Why are they covering their faces? We know why they cover their faces. So we demand that they take off the cover. In the name of freedom of speech, so that we know who you are. And your employers will know who you are. And your neighbors will know who you are. And the FBI will know who you are. For it's time for our societies to defend themselves, rise to the occasion of protect our future, our children's future. For if we do not protect ourselves, if we fail in the most basic human demand to recognize evil for what it is, it's our moral failure. Then we have failed, and we cannot fail. For our very future depends on it. This is our Hinenu moment. This is our Hinenu moment. And that's why we are here tonight. Because we know it's our moment to rise. Because we know it's our moment to educate, inspire, empower, and fight evil. This has always been our role. This has always been Israel's burden. And now in the blood of our soldiers, dying fighting these monstrosities, we will purify the region from the evil of Hamas. We will fight against the evil of Iran. And we will tell the world what we think of the world. when Antonio Gutierrez tells us that there is context to massacre. And then he rushes to New York to shake the bloodied hand of the Iranian foreign minister. After all of the criticism that was uttered against him, he cracks a joke with the Iranian. I'm still alive, he says. As if all of this is a joke. I'm still alive. The same bloodied hand that butchered Americans and still does so in Iraq and Syria. The same bloodied hand that in the course of my army service paid Islamic Jihad by the head of how many Jews were killed. And if it's a pregnant woman, you get twice the amount. These are the monstrosities who tell us who they are. It's a moment of great reckoning with many on our progressive camp. People like Ilan Benjamin, the cousin of the late Daniel Pearl. My father is Jewish. My mother is Jewish. I am Jewish. When Ilan says, I've always been critical of the occupation, I've always been critical of Israel, but now when thousands of Jews, Israelis, were murdered mercilessly, cruelly, by beasts, by monsters, I look around me and I see all of those people with whom I used to stand and they gloat. They're energized. It's awesome. It's resistance. Who are you? Who am I? He asks himself in a great essay published on the Free Press. By the way, if you don't follow the Free Press, it's a great outlet by Barry Weiss. Beautiful articles, really smart and intelligent, that touch the core of the issues. I urge you, take a read. You know, you get those newsletters and you say, should I read, shouldn't I read? And I always find a reason to read what she publishes, always. I also want to say that this is a great moment of empowerment. For Israeli society has never come together the way we are now. We've never seen the beauty of our people the way we see now. Today, over 100 ultra-Orthodox young men who joined the army right after the massacre, finished their basic training and are out there to support the IDF, along with thousands of others in the pipeline. Today, Israelis are donating their time, money, and effort to host Israeli refugees. Yes, it exists, hundreds of thousands of them, who left the areas in the north and south during the war. Today, Israeli PR companies are doing their best to tell Israel's story to the world. Today, Israelis are together, bringing down the barriers of politics like we've used to seeing in the past few years. They exist no more, for we are all brothers and sisters. Today, Israel has come together with a beautiful American Jewish community, where we've seen so much friction in the course of the last few years between the Israeli government and the people, and suddenly the communities rise to the occasion, like you, and say, Hinenu, we stand by Israel, the great iron fist of the Jewish world. What a beautiful union. What great hope can come out of this incredible determination. We say, we cry. Yes, we cry, we grieve, we are sorry, we feel horrible. But our tears will turn to fire as we fight our enemies to victory, to save our future and our children, to rebuild our nation. A group of architects who come together in Tel Aviv and are already working on the plans to rebuild the entire south of Israel. Others who work on documentation of this Holocaust, collecting testimonies, videos, survivors, yes, I'm using that word, survivors, grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, who are Holocaust survivors themselves. Those materials are collected so that these people's stories will be heard for generations to come. Never again, we always say, is now. Never again is now. It's now. And we should not ignore those important silver linings. The coming together of Israeli society, when organizations like Israel use all of those skills helping people all over the world to help our brothers and sisters in Israel. To see Israelis feel the same and give a hug. To see a fellow Jew, and not just Jews, all people of morality, of faith, of humanity. It's not a Jewish cause. It's a human cause. Who can look at this evil and say, you have to understand there is a greater context to it. We left Gaza in 2005. Let me state the obvious. To give hope to the Palestinians, to show us that they can exercise sovereignty, that they can build a Singapore of the Middle East. It didn't take them long. It didn't take them long. But it didn't start with 2005. It didn't. Because there is one face I carry with me. In a column I wrote for the Huffington Post years ago, I called it the world's betrayal of Israel. Because I will always carry with me Ayala Chaya Abekassis. Ayala walked with her brother in January of 2001 in Sderot. They went to a Bnei Akiva youth movement, and it was Saturday night, and she hears the shrill of a Qassam rocket. She's 17, Tamir, her brother, barely bar mitzvah. She understands what's coming. There was no red alert, but she knew what was coming. Ayala jumped at Tamir immediately. She protected him with her body. Ayala was hurt from a shrapnel of that rocket that fell very close to them. She laid in the hospital bed for 5 days, fighting for her life, along with the people of Israel who were praying and fighting for her. Ayala gave her life for her brother and was murdered by Hamas in January of 2001. And the image that shall forever be seared into my mind was that ultra-Jewish image of Tamir and her father standing by her grave, blowing the shofar in her memory of Ayala Chaya Abekassis. This is the reality of the people of Israel. These are the faces, the names, the people. Wherever we go, we carry them with us. He who saves the world entire. This is the people of Israel. And these memories energize us to do the right thing, to know that we can keep quiet no more, that this is our time to rise, to ask ourselves, what can each and every one of us do? How can we be part of this effort? What do we feel comfortable doing? Do we want to work on social media? Do we want to spread the good word? Do we want to report the negative accounts that spread lies? Do we want to donate money? Do we want to volunteer with one of those organizations? Hineni. This is our generation's fight. We're not going to let anyone forget it. All of those connections we fostered over the years, interfaith, JCRC, outreach, we want to see them stand by us. And if they don't stand by us, we know you, we will remember you. We know you, we will remember you. This is an age of accountability. There has to be consequences. When the United Nations chooses to vote overwhelmingly, 120 versus 14, for a ceasefire, they were voting not to denounce Hamas. For the very essence of that organization was to counter evil on earth, and yet you look evil in the eye and you dare not condemn it? What is this decay in the bottom of your heart that allows you to look the other way from the torture of innocent elderly people, children, men and women whose only crime was being born Jewish? And yet you look the other way? You call for a ceasefire? When the United States put forth a resolution on the Security Council floor to denounce Hamas, it's vetoed by Russia? That's the world we live in? We remember. And we will remember. If the United States gives the UN $12.5 billion a year, should that money go elsewhere? If international organizations like the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, is a cover for Hamas, should money go elsewhere? For we demand accountability and transparency, not in the name of the Jews, in the name of humanity. For your taxpayer money should not go to fund hatred, should not go to fund genocide. This is a demand that needs to be made by our leaders. When the United States and the West sign a deal with Iran that only focuses on the nuclear issue, we need to ask ourselves, can we afford to look the other way from the terror they inflict on their own citizens, from the executions of gays, from the raping of young girls demonstrating in the streets for some freedom? Should we look the other way when they fund the terror in Yemen, bringing misery to millions of people? They do the same in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in South America, where their opium trade network through Hezbollah is very active in funneling drugs into the United States. So we should just whistle by and say, they don't really mean it. Believe them when they tell you who they are. Believe them. do not repeat Israel's mistake. So one of the dangers of being an Israeli diplomat is once you give me a microphone, it's at your own risk. So I will just end by a quote that I've been carrying with me and I love looking at, and maybe open the floor for some questions and answers if you have. I mean, questions for sure, answers I'm not sure. But I will just say, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time of war, and a time of peace. So in one of the interviews I was asked, Americans took time to cope with 9/11. How do you cope with the grief? And to that I said, we will, at some point, once this evil is over and the eradication of Hamas is done, we can pause and grieve for each and every one of our citizens murdered so cruelly, for each and every one of our young soldiers who had a whole life and future ahead of them, who had to give their lives for humanity. But now is the time to fight. Our tears are like fire. Our determination has never been stronger. Our hearts are iron, and together we stand as Israelis, as Jews, as decent human beings for the goal of saving humanity from the threats of evil in the education sphere, on the streets of our cities, and on the global stage where evil needs to be called out by its name. And may it soon be that time of peace and healing. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you very much.